Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the November Policy Committee meeting. I want to start with introductions. We have not one, but two students joining us today. And Joanna is our currently serving student representative, but she's going to be passing the torch to Rachel. Sure. Want to say hi, Rachel? Hi. Okay. I guess the changeover is next month. Is that what's going on, Joanna? Okay. All right. Well,
I'll be here next month.
Great.
January.
I don't like goodbyes, so good. We have one more month before we have to avoid that. So thank you for coming on to learn the ropes this month. And of course, happy to have our teacher representative, Mrs. McMenamin. I think Andrew said he'd be running a little late, and Chuck and Susan are here. Dr. Rabarchek, good evening. Ed Diazio, good evening. And congratulations on your soon to becoming a father. Very exciting. And I will turn it over to Dr. Rabarchek for some administrative remarks.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Just a quick note that, as we go through our admin remarks, as we do and have in the past, we've kept them to be focused on the work that to comment on the work we're just focusing on tonight, and that is Policy 004, Orientation of New Board Members, Policy 718, Service Animals in Schools, Policy 003, Functions, and Policy 222, Use of Tobacco and Electronic Smoking Devices. Just to state in regards to Policy 222 and how this came to be, there was some changes from the Federal Drug Administration recently declaring vaping as a teenage epidemic, and that PSBA advised districts to review smoking policies accordingly. And review of our policy concerns regarding the purpose were identified, and that it contained an incomplete statement of the board's concern that it is the foundation of the policy. So nowhere is it referenced as to the dangers of electronic smoking products, since they do not tend to contain tobacco, but rather nicotine and other hazardous chemicals. So, and then we're also looking into the AR, which we have one, but much of what was in the policy was actually in the AR material. So we did use a model from another district that was moved into the policy, and the content of that AR was shortened to the policy as it's become our practice. And this policy is being proposed to also change the name and to keep it with what we're actually speaking to in electronic smoking products. So as a result, we moved forward to look to revise this policy, and since we were using a model of another district, we did not redline it, so it was restructured. So that's the purpose why there's no red line for that current policy tonight.
Okay, great. Did you have a 915 AR update that you wanted to share?
No, Mr. Petiti and I will update the next month's meeting in regards to 915 and all the steps that were being taken. Unfortunately, we did not get together today to follow through.
Okay. All right, terrific. So that concludes your administrative remarks? Right. Okay, great. Then let's move into public comment. Is there any public comment this evening? Good evening.
Good evening, Judy Sherry, Governor Circle, Newtown Square. My comments are mostly in response to the questions that I asked last time. Question number 1, I asked if the board reviews the public comment responses for accuracy. The response was no on one of the pages, government, I think. Do any board members review the public comments for accuracy? The public comment responses for accuracy. Do board members take any responsibility for responding to public questions? Do board members provide information or input into any of the responses? If so, which ones? How do they determine that? Number 2, on the list of questions from policy, 2 of the 3 questions there are still not answered. If a booster club fee is not paid, are there consequences for the student? The response says, there's no limit A booster club can charge as a fee. It is up to the individual organization. The booster club budgets will be established based on the needs of the organization and how they support the students. It is not required for the budget to show justification for the fee charged. That did not answer my question about if a booster club fee is not paid, are there consequences for the student? At least I can't figure out an answer in that response. And will the booster club budget be established prior to its establishing a fee? Then question number 5, follow-up. It says that in policy 006, it states that public comment can be deferred to the next meeting. So my question is, when will the board leadership announce the amount of additional time that will be provided? Deferred should not mean eliminated. Tonight, the discussion is on functions, review of school board policies. Question 6. The policy states that policies will be reviewed periodically, the functions policy. How does your response to question 6 ensure a comprehensive review? Why doesn't it make sense to have a specific review scheduled on the calendar that includes policy categories in addition to the procedures listed in your response to number 6, which says policies come up for review when the administration identifies a need or changes to the law requires it, or identifying policies that no longer reflect the practices. So why does the board depend only on the administration to identify a need for a review? And what is the board's responsibility regarding its policies? And number 10, my last question, is the ethics law limited just to a statement of financial interest? If not, what else is included in the ethics law? That was a question that I had asked about the ethics law, and it says the superintendent will be informing board members about their annual obligations to submit their statement of financial interest. The form is usually sent out by the board secretary. But the policy doesn't state that. So the policy states that the superintendent will be informing the board of its responsibility. So if that's the only thing the ethics law is limited to, I'd like to know that. And if not, I'd like to know what else is included. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good evening, Cindy Spurtle, Wayne. I have a question on the answer to a question of mine from last month, and that was concerning the policy 006, section 5, that the board will receive the agenda, et cetera, 3 days prior to the meeting date, and could the public be included in that portion of the policy? Now, that question was answered in the meeting, but it was also answered, and it reads, under that it says the agenda together with all relevant reports shall be provided to each board member at least 3 days before the meeting. Now, in the answer, the response was that this change will not be made, as there may be instances when the agenda may not be available 3 days in advance due to unavoidable events such as weather, emergencies, etc. In policies, the word shall and may have specific meanings. I understand that, but that didn't answer the question, because if it isn't going to be ready due to weather and other emergencies for the board, then I can understand it isn't going to be ready. But the way it is answered, you don't even have to have, the agenda does not even have to be prepared for the board and given to them 3 days prior to the meeting if there's an emergency. So the word shall, once again, does not, makes it specifically, it is a required provision. So that's not answering my question. My question was using the word will or may, could the public be included in that section of the policy? And it's, I believe that the answer doesn't answer correctly what the question was. And if there's a problem getting it out, period, then the required provision is not being done. The mandatory provision is not being handled to the board either. So the word shall may not be the word that you want to use in that instance. I have a question on the policy functions that tonight, And it's a question that, in looking at the function of the board and the policy, writing of policies, the changing of policies, the decision to be made on when the policy will be changed or looked at, and also what's happened over the past year in the policy committee and the writing of policies is that the policies have been shortened, and a lot of the detail is now in the responsibility of the superintendent or designee in writing the ARs. And the question I have, that some policies are very, very short and becoming shorter with everything being included in the administrative regulation and as far as details for the policy. What would trigger a review of the AR by the board? There is no mention in this policy of functions of a review by the board of the ARs. Do you feel that the board has a responsibility to review the ARs? And is there a trigger for that review? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that concludes public comment, and we'll move into the approval of minutes. Everybody good with the minutes? Okay, terrific. Then let's move on to our first agenda item, which is that policy 003 functions. Dr. Robarczyk?
Sure. At this time, we ask that 003 be brought forward for review. That administration made the revisions to memorialize the policy review practices and provide the maximum consistency and efficiency in our actual review and work policy. We're requesting that upon review of this tonight, that we approve for a first read. Whoop, that was a mistake there. Sorry. Second read. Oh, it is a first read. I got to remember now. First read at the November regular business meeting, not the October.
Okay, so let's start. Students, do you have any questions, comments about policy 003 functions that you'd like to raise? No? Mrs. McMenamin? Susan?
Yes.
Okay.
So at the end of last month's meeting, there was a brief discussion, really after we had done the work on this policy. So I said I thought it should be deferred to this month. And it was my understanding that this was going to get perhaps reviewed and adjusted. But on page, the last page where it says, the superintendent or designee shall inform board members and designated employees of their responsibilities under the ethics law. I did think that we were going to be a little bit more specific there about what we are actually made aware of with regard to the ethics law. And so I was surprised to not see anything here about that. I know offline there's been a discussion, or at least from what Dr. Robarczyk said, this is in regards to our responsibility to fill out the financial disclosure form. So I don't know if Ed can fill us in, or Tony can fill us in on, what, if there's more, there may be more that is in the ethics law, but with regard to the superintendent's responsibility to make sure that we are aware of this particular aspect. The only particular aspect we need to be made aware of is our responsibility to fill out the financial disclosure form, is my understanding. So I think, I think we should get some clarity here on even just adding in a few words to say exactly what it is we do and don't do with regard to that. That's my biggest thought on this particular
Yes,
one.
I remember that conversation, so that was where it left off there.
Right.
So do you want to pursue that now?
Well, I think, I don't know if Chuck has a thought, I do think that if either Ed or Tony could weigh in on, is there, what I'm assuming is, obviously, there's an ethics law, we are supposed to uphold it. We get that by virtue of taking our oath when we take office, but how I read this is that there is a particular responsibility that the district has to give us the disclosure form. So maybe you could all clarify, and that's what this particular section is referencing.
Yeah, so one aspect of the Ethics Act would be the form that needs to get filled out each year. In addition to that, the law does cover things like conflicts of interest and other topics beyond just the disclosure form that gets filled out. My guess is that would be covered in the conflicts of interest policy. And so perhaps one of the things that we could look at doing, this is just one option, is moving the language out of the functions policy regarding the Ethics Act and look at the conflict of interest policy.
Well, so let me ask you a question about that. I mean, we have policy 4 that says we go through training. And one of the pieces of training that we're made aware of is, we're given and I think board members are required to be given their, the policy manual. Well, I don't know if it's required, but we're all given a policy manual. We all have, for all the things that have gone paperless, we're all given a policy manual. That is, by virtue of the district giving it to us, our manner of knowing what our responsibilities are with regard to the various ethics laws. But the form we have to be given. So I mean, I would think that there's some language that in this particular one that could say, their responsibility under the ethics law as it pertains to the financial disclosure form. I don't know what the appropriate wording here. I read this, I thought that this was a requirement of the district. So then I would assume the state has a particular intention here with regard to what the district is obligated to make sure that they give us or inform us with regard to this. That's I guess maybe what I'm trying to ask. Is there a narrow scope that is dictated by state mandate or school code?
No, I'm not aware of any legal requirement for the district to actually specifically make board members aware of specific requirements.
Beyond the financial.
Correct, and that's an obligation of board members to do, even if you're not provided notice. You have to submit the statement every year, regardless of whether it's given to you or not. I think common practice among all school districts is that board members are given that form, and that's consistent with what this policy said previously. But there's no legal requirement to have this language in this policy.
And this was an original PSBA 2008 policy?
Oh, yeah, no, the wording is definitely 2008 boilerplate, yes.
So, do you want to think about that? And we'll see do you have any other comments on the policy before I move to Chuck, or?
Well, I think my only comment about it is I don't generally, it's a general statement, not a blanket statement. I don't generally think that we should have statements in our policies that say things that the district or the superintendent shall do, which means you're required to do them, if they're not required to be done by law. I think wills and mays, are the more appropriate language when it's not dictated by law. That's my personal feeling. The financial office gives us the financial form. It's really helpful. Don't get me wrong, please don't stop doing that. It's really helpful, but if it's a courtesy or something that facilitates as opposed to something that's required by law, I think that we should have the word shall should be changed to will, because it's still your intention to do so. But it's not if it's not a mandate of law, I don't think it should say shall.
If it's not a mandate of law, do you think it should even be in the policy, as Ed was
Well,
referencing?
I mean, it's something that we do, and I think that the district has the intention of continuing to do it. So that's will is the appropriate use of the word there. I mean, Ed, weigh in if you disagree with me. And then we could be more specific, and add something at the end of the sentence, with regard to board members' obligation to complete a financial disclosure statement yearly. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing for us. Please weigh in, but that is what the district does in its practice. You inform us of our responsibility to fill out the form every year by virtue of giving it to us and saying, please fill this out.
May I ask a clarifying question
Sure.
along those lines? That if the ethics law also speaks to, because you referenced 826, the conflict of interest policy, are there things we're obligated to do that fall under the Ethics Act that have to do with policy 826? And is the ethics law mentioned in 826 so that this could be eliminated and that could all be that may even already be covered in 826? It could be duplicative language.
It might be.
So is that something maybe to look into?
We could look at that.
Okay. And then see what we,
Let Chuck weigh in.
yeah. I just wanted to put that out there as yet another option. Chuck, what do you think?
No, I would agree. I would agree with Susan on that one. The other piece, I'm very
Oh,
curious.
wait. When you say you agree with Susan,
With changing the word from shall. But I also would be, if it was put into conflict of interest, I would agree with that also, that we could remove it totally. The other piece that, because this is specifically toward the functions of a school board, and is that correct?
It's the section of the policy manual is called Local Board Procedures,
And
and the title of the policy is Functions.
So I was just curious of who the designated employees. So the superintendent are designated to, in other words, it's a little bit confusing to me. Who are the other people that you're going to give it to if they're not board people there? Why would that be in there? Because you do have the responsibility to give that to somebody else. But should it be in here? Because this is
Good
talking
question.
about how we're giving it to board people, not other people. The other people are covered someplace else, I would think.
Just to explain further, I'm sorry. In 826, under the guidelines, there is a disclosure of financial interest piece, and it does reference the ethics law in here, so.
Okay.
So it is covered in 826
Would
as
you guys
well.
feel comfortable, since it's in 826, to strike it from this policy, since it's somewhere else? Pretty much what you wanted to be stated in this policy with regard to that aspect of the ethics law?
The thing is, in 826, because I have it open, it doesn't specifically state. Oh, I'm so sorry, thank you. The only thing is that, at least what I'm reading in 826 right now, is that it doesn't say, what it says is that we won't be paid, shall follow your statement, oh, yeah, actually it does on
Yeah.
page 3, so we're
Yeah.
good. Yep, no, it
Let's
does,
say
it
the
says
top
it.
of page 3,
It does. It says the district solicitor and district employees, actually, it does, shall file a statement of financial interest as required by law. No board member shall be allowed to take the oath of office or enter or continue upon his duties, nor shall he or she receive compensation from public funds unless he or she has filed a statement of financial interest as required by law.
Okay, so since those are our obligations, they're outlined in 826, I'd like to put out there the idea that we strike that sentence altogether from the policy. What does everybody think about that?
I'm comfortable with it. I think it's clearly stated in 826.
Susan?
Yes, I mean, as long as we know that PA 65 is that the state ethics law, and it was scratched out because we've gone to a new way of cross-referencing
Yes, I believe that's correct.
school codes. Okay, all right. I mean, I'm
What do
fine
you
with that
think?
as well.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so let it be, so this policy has gone already to the board for a first read, right? Did this went for a first read in October? Or no? I can't,
it's
I'm
back
trying to
for
No,
remember.
this
First
is
read.
back for a first read. This is
Okay.
the one that
Okay,
came back.
okay. So we're good to make a change before it goes before the board at the end of the month? So I guess the board agrees that the committee agrees that we should take that sentence out, that last sentence out.
Noted.
Are there any other comments on the policy? Okay, because I have one, and I would like to draw your attention to the second paragraph, where it says, "The administration shall have the authority," and I'm reading this because it didn't quite make sense to me the way it was worded, and I just wanted to point that out. "The administration shall have the authority to make non-substantive changes to board policies for the purpose of administrative clarity and shall notify these changes," to the board policy committee. So I watched the meeting again, and I think that what the proposed wording was, if you follow along with me, this is what came up last month. The administration shall have the authority to make non-substantive changes to board policies for the purpose of administrative clarity and shall notify the policy committee of these changes. That was what we landed on last month. And so if we can fix that in time for the end of the month, if you need me to repeat, I'd be happy to, but you think you got it? Okay. Great. So if there are no other comments on policy 003, let's move it forward for a first read in November. We're in November. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
It is.
Yeah, there's those boxes I thought were going to go away or something on the top of the policy. But this is going for a first read in November. Is that correct, everybody?
It's now going to have to, because that's a significant change.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
Even if it was, it would be a repeat first read because of that
Right.
significant change, a
Right.
substantive change.
Okay, so first read in November with those two changes. Okay, great. Let's move on to the second policy on the agenda, which is 718, service animals in schools. This one did go for a first read in October, right?
Correct.
Dr.
This went for
Robarczyk?
a first read, and no changes were, I want to make sure no changes were made. But we did capitalize service animal because it was now defined. So we took care of the capitalization within the policy and the AR itself.
Okay, any comments before the second read from anybody on the committee? Students, teacher, Susan, Chuck? Nope, okay. Well, then it's ready to go forward for a second read in November. And that will move us along to policy 004, orientation program for new board members. Starting over with the students, do you have any questions or feedback on policy 004? No? Mrs. McMenamin? No? Susan?
Yes. So Amy and I talked offline this weekend for the purposes of efficiency. I don't believe that the purpose, as it's currently written, is really something that is at all, we can't execute on it. As a matter of good governance, the board believes that its members shall have the necessary knowledge to effectively carry out their important responsibilities in managing the district. While we might agree with that, we can't actually guarantee that they shall have them. And in fact, the intention of this orientation program is that, you know, we have the intention that that's what would be the case with board members, and we have an intention to provide them with the tools vis-a-vis the orientation program. But we can't actually give them the necessary knowledge. So Amy and I kind of talked over the weekend, and I think she has proposed some, what I think is a more accurate intention in terms of our purpose, if you want to read it.
Okay.
But it was kind of a back and forth between the two of us.
Okay, so, and I agreed with Susan. I thought for all the reasons she just stated, that the purpose needed to be revised. And so what we came up with is,
Proposed.
we came up with,
Yeah.
as a proposed purpose, is as a matter of good governance, the board believes that it is helpful for its members to have the necessary familiarity with its schools and district operations to effectively carry out its important responsibilities in governing the district. I think our two primary objections were using the word managing, because that's really Ken's job. We're governors, we're not managers. And the wording of necessary familiarity with its schools and district operations reflects what the orientation program provides. So that's the proposed new purpose, and I'd like to open it up for feedback from the committee. Chuck?
Can you just
Want me to
that
read
again?
one more
Yeah,
time?
please.
Okay. As a matter of good governance, the board believes that it is helpful for its members to have the necessary familiarity with its schools and district operations to effectively carry out its important responsibilities in governing the district. Everything else that's written beyond that would stay the same. The sentence that we're proposing to be changed is that one purpose sentence in the beginning. The guidelines and everything else would stay the same. Mrs. McMenamin, you look concerned over there. You have that?
I'm just thinking about it.
Okay. Chuck, how do you feel about that?
The helpful kind of confuses me a little bit. That's it.
Okay.
That word.
What would you prefer for it to say, and
Oh,
what?
I'm critiquing that.
Okay.
All right.
I'm in my critique
All right,
mode.
how about if we say this? How about, as a matter of good governance, the board believes that providing its members with familiarity with the schools will assist them in effectively carrying out their responsibilities.
Well, let me ask this more
It's a little better,
fundamental.
Except for the assist.
Let me ask this question. Chuck, is it helpful a concern to you because you think it should be a stronger word?
No,
Or do you think,
Providing
okay.
members.
I don't know. No, I just don't like
members
helpful, like
with-
you're going to give me things and it will be helpful for me to make a decision.
That
You wanna
providing
just-
its members.
I do like the other one a little better, The second one that Susan read.
Okay.
Do you want to just use the word orientation? Because that's what this is about.
The board believes that it is helpful
Or
to
take-
to orient its members with the.
No, he doesn't want to use the word
Orientation.
helpful.
Don't use helpful,
I
provide,
d-
just
didn't
make
mean
a
to use
statement.
helpful,
Yeah, say
sorry.
provide orientation.
All right, how about this?
Provide orientation about the programs.
As a matter of good governance, the board believes that providing its members with an orientation program to have the necessary familiarity with the school and district operations, will assist. It's got to come back for another first read. So why don't we just kind of listen to the comments and propose it in, people are going to need to read it. I think that what we're saying is people are going to need to read this and chew on it. So all I really wanted to do is bring forth the concept, and then Amy picked up on the word managing isn't really the correct word with regard to our role of being, governing the district. And, we'll bring it back as a different first read next month and not
Okay.
spend more time
Super, and
wordsmithing.
I circled the word helpful because I did share this proposed language with Tony. And so I've, for myself, circled the word helpful because that seems to be one of the places where we're stumbling. All right?
Yep.
So that'll come back again in December. Sound good? Okay. And then the last item on our agenda for this evening is Policy 222, Use of Tobacco and Electronic Smoking Products. Tony, do you want to give us some
So
background?
this policy, as I mentioned in my administration remarks, was brought because of changes to the FDA and recognizing electronic smoking products as another aspect to being harmful to students. And so what we were trying to accomplish in developing and revising this policy was to include not just the tobacco content, but the electronic smoking products because it contains the nicotine component. So we did use another district, as I mentioned, as a model, and and we also found that during the revisions and the investigation of it, our AR is not in a line, the title of it, with our policy to begin with. So we wanted to clean everything up with this policy.
Okay, I just also want to clarify, nothing changed with the FDA, but the
No, nothing changed. They just made
FDA chief
recommendations.
issued a warning that he identified, he considers vaping to be a teenage epidemic.
Right.
And there's been a lot of
There was an additional
publicity, and
statement regarding.
PSBA has reached out to its districts to say that this is a concern and you should look over your policy, so. But let's go around for some feedback. This might be a subject of, especially since a letter just came out, I believe, from
From the high school.
the high school on this topic. So Joanna, Rachel, do you have any thoughts on this policy?
While I was just looking over it, I found 2 changes that I thought should be made, if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So where it says, what?
To the,
To the actual policy.
to the one that has the revisions in it, or the original one?
The clean one?
The clean version? Okay, so
Yes,
that's the one
but-
that has the title Smoking-Related Products at the top?
Oh, is there a paper? Could you grab me a paper one, Rachel? Yeah. I can pull it up on my phone. It was just kind of not working that well on my computer.
So,
Let me just look at that.
Joanna, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that was, and I do need to say, one of the things that was confusing about this is the way this was presented in our packets and online, it makes it seem as if this is our existing policy, not this one, but the one that you actually inserted in our packets, and it showed no red line.
Okay.
This is not at all our policy. We actually have an existing policy. And
That's what's up on the screen.
I get that.
I know, I'm telling them.
Oh, got it. With all due respect, it was confusing. I was like, where did this policy come from? Where is the red line? So when you, Joanne, when you just said you wanted to make changes, I just wasn't sure if you
Yeah.
meant the policy that we were provided with in our
This one.
packet. So that's not even actually,
It's not even ours.
it's not our
Oh.
We have an existing in-force policy
Uh-huh.
that actually addresses electronic smoking products.
Okay.
So I don't know procedurally, I mean, I guess we can talk theoretically about making changes to this policy that they that they put in our packets, except that it's not our existing policy.
I mean, from what I see from on the policy that's on the board.
Yeah.
It's the same type of changes because all I wanted to add was for the definitions for like
Okay,
electronic
good.
smoking products. In the letter that was sent to us, it includes marijuana, but that's not included in the policy, and I think that's important to include. I mean, I didn't see it from looking at this moment right on the screen, but
It's a question I actually had.
yes. Oh, you had for
No, I
us?
had,
Oh,
I
yeah.
was somewhat
question.
similar question.
So there's that, and then I think it's even used in our policy too. The word potentially, if isn't it determined that they're harmful chemicals? Like they're not potentially harmful; they are harmful because of all the studies that have been done. Do you know what I mean? That was just something that I was thinking of, but that's really it. And that was in this one, and I just by looking at the screen, I think that's in our policy too. But yeah.
That's great. Thank you for those comments. I mean, maybe to Susan's point, because I had brought this up to you, Tony, when I had asked when this 222 was put forth in the packets, I had asked, where is the red line? And maybe you and Ed can explain how when you're in your crafting of this policy that you're putting forth here, you didn't redline the old one, sort of give Susan a little insight and the rest of us insight into your thinking about why there wasn't a red line presented, just so we know as a matter of practice how that happened.
I think at the, when we met for the planning meeting for this meeting, which would have been back in October, 222 had come up as a potential future item of discussion. It was unclear, at the time, 222 is legally sufficient as it stands, but there's different districts have different ways of conveying that policy. And I think that there were different committee members that liked the way that it was presented. I don't know if it was both Amy, you and Chuck. I don't know who was at that meeting, but we were looking at the way other school districts put those policies together, and we saw one particular format that looked very similar to this clean version that we have, and we decided that maybe it would be best to present that as an option for the committee. I don't recall the exact reason beyond that why we didn't redline. I don't recall, Tony. I don't know if
I
you
don't.
have
I
any-
just recall the same thing from our meeting, that we thought we were starting with the new, because it was a whole new approach to the, to actually the policy. So we can bring this back as, with the red line next month, to really to show the difference between the two in regards to the language.
Yeah, I mean,
Changes.
I have a completely different thought. I don't think we should be doing anything.
Okay.
I mean, that's my personal
Right.
opinion. I understand that PSBA and everybody wanted everybody to look at, vaping and electronic cigarettes. We did that three years ago. August 26, 2014, we had done a lot of work and talked about electronic tobacco use. So if this was an intention to look at, hey, does our current tobacco policy cover e-cigarettes and vaping? It does. We did it 3 years ago. So I don't even understand why we're bringing this forward. What concerns me about the one that you proposed, in addition to the fact that it has, I didn't know that that's what that was, is that there are things in our current policy that aren't at all addressed in the new proposed one. Things that I think belong in a policy versus in an AR. Things like the school district might prosecute. Or, there are very specific things that are in our current policy, actions that might be taken against students that I don't think, I could be wrong, I don't think are the kinds of things that you can have in an AR. If it's our, so we would have to take a look at this whole policy and say, do we still, as a district, want to take this particular view toward how we might treat students who are smoking or using, electronic products on our property. What I wanted to mention about what Joanna said, I also noticed it didn't say anything about marijuana. We have a different policy, 227, which is controlled substances. Now, that may actually change over time as, depending on what happens legally with how marijuana may or may not be classified. What's not in 227 is it doesn't really specifically mention marijuana. It seems to talk about other it's a controlled substance, so it's certainly covered. That might be the policy where we maybe would have added something about concerns around vaping marijuana. This is about a product that is legal, but not legal to use on our property. That's kind of my, so if you guys want to take it back and have a more, I wouldn't support making this change. So
Okay.
it may go that way this month, and I don't support it.
I'll hear from the rest of the committee in
Chuck?
regards to the direction you would like to go.
If I remember the conversation, we were a little bit concerned about the prosecution of our students. And we wanted to look into what we're actually doing now. So I think before we would continue to move on, we would like to get some better information on that. What's actually, what do we want to do? What does the administration and the high school principal, what are some of the things, or the tools, kind of like what Susan's bringing up, would they expect to have or would they want to have, so that we're not putting something in place that is going to make their job more difficult. So maybe we could look into that before we come back. If that's about all I would have.
And I just wanted to make sure, did you see the letter?
I did,
Okay,
actually.
so I just want to make sure you have it. Do you need a copy of the letter that came out in the Radnor Reader on Sunday from?
No.
You don't want to see it, or you didn't?
No, I mean, if it went out to parents and guardians, yeah.
What?
I mean, I'm not a parent or a guardian right now in the district, so I didn't get it.
Okay, for some reason, I'm still on the distribution list, but if you'd like a copy, I have a copy.
Okay, great, thanks.
So why don't we go back? I do think that there were two pieces of this policy that were worked on. One was the purpose speaks only to the perils of tobacco. And that was something that we wanted to expand when in talking about the purpose, is to have the scope of the policy address the perils of all products that pose a health hazard. That's why this isn't, we added electronic smoking products in the first place, because they're dangerous. And the second thing is that in looking at the policy, one of the changes Tony made was that the administrative regulation and the policy had duplicate language. And so as long as the purpose was going to be revised, I think what Ed and Tony did was change the format of the policy to put much of the AR language, which was duplicative, leave it in the AR. So the AR, it came out of the policy and went into the AR. Now that's a separate issue if some of the stuff that's now exclusively in the AR, as opposed to both places, belongs in the policy. But I guess Tony or Ed will look into that and see where's the proper place for those pieces. So would you look into those three things and let us
Will
know
do.
next month?
Yes.
Okay. Does that satisfy everybody's concerns?
Oh, I mean, yes, and let me just say, I particularly feel this way, given now that I am reading this letter, because the letter specifically references the consequences that are listed in our existing policy that aren't even listed in that proposed new policy. So this letter, if we had gone ahead and passed this alternate version, this letter wouldn't be enforceable at all with regard to the consequences. Now, I thoroughly agree with what Chuck said about that's for the district to talk about, and for the administration to talk about, particularly with the high school administration, about what they feel would best support their intention and what they're trying to do up there. So that's a piece of information that's probably needed.
Right, so they have some review to do with that, and we'll talk about it more in December. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a related question, and that is, oftentimes in America, we try to legislate morality. We legislate what people can do, what they can't do. I think we need to move a little bit past that, and I'm sure we are doing this, but in our curriculum, I think it would be helpful to know what we're doing specifically, so that to get the explanation of why you don't go and smoke these electronic devices. So it's an education piece, and I'd like to actually, and this isn't related to this particular committee, but I would like to see where does that fall within our curriculum? Because we're looking at the holistic development of a child. So let's educate them rather than punish them is what I'm looking at. Okay? So that I think would be important.
Okay. Ken, did you have something you wanted to say?
And I know it's what we do in, in our health classes and in their, curriculum. There have opportunities where we do, talk to kids about choices and healthy choices. And we can certainly have some follow-up and provide that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any more comments? All right, so we have our plan for next month. Ed, looks like you were reaching for a question?
Well, I'll wait till the end.
Well, we are at the, we are at the end. And
Well, then in that case, I just want to go back and confirm, 004 is not moving forward to
Correct.
a first read. That's going to come back again.
Correct.
Just want to make sure that everybody was clear, because I
Yes.
sensed that maybe everybody wasn't on the same page.
Well, there's wordsmithing to be done that we didn't need to do here. So you guys are going to present it as a new first read next month.
004 will come back. Repeat, first read.
right, as will the 222. We'll see for the, again, hear it at the committee level in December.
Or it won't
Right.
change, and it won't come forward.
It's another option.
Yes. Another option.
Okay, so let's move then on to new business. I think, Dr. Robarczyk, you had some new business
Yes.
you wanted to share?
Not normally have a lot of new business, but this time, we've been discussing the whole piece about board docs and having our policies and administrative regulations put up onto the board doc system. So we were fortunate enough to make connection with PSBA Policy Services, and because it's new business, and I didn't have this for the public right now, but we can provide it. This is just the layout of the different services that they do offer. There's a policy conversion process, a merged employee policy service, a policy review service, and administrative regulation services. And what I've done down below in the chart is I've basically just laid out what each of the pricing pieces are for each of these services, the time frame of what it can be completed, and then there's combined prices. So they do bundle the packages to some extent. If you look down to option number 2, it's policy conversion process and merged employee services. So if you put the two of those together, the policy conversion process up top was $1,100. They'll discount it to $800 if you're doing both. So what we'll need to do is have a discussion in regards to, is this one of the possibilities of moving forward and getting our documents up onto board docs in a more productive manner? Because we were looking through the actual board docs company, and unfortunately they're not truly in the business for uploading all those documents, and their queue time for getting them into the system was much more longer than PSBA would offer. So I'll take any questions. Myself, Patty, and Molly.
Go up into policies
Yeah. Ed's got the control.
and then go over on the, where it says Radnor Township School District. Click on the arrow, click policy manual. All our policies are there now.
Never mind. No, I know. I know, I'm not saying it. But they are all up.
That is a, thank
Yeah.
you, Mrs. Calderoni. Thank you, Patty.
I'm sure there are some references, legal references
Yeah.
that need to be fixed.
But
Oh, my
thank you.
goodness.
That's a
Wow.
large piece of work.
On there somewhere.
Yeah, it's a large piece of
Bravo.
work. Thank you.
Yes,
Bravo.
wow,
So we
that's,
can switch that around and make it public as long as you.
And
Okay.
maybe the other piece of this discussion is something you can have next month, and committee members can talk, to reach out to Dr. Robarczyk. The other pieces of this is a more expanded piece than just putting it up on board docs.
Right.
It is the expanded piece of, looking at a potential 3-year process, and do we want to look at that, look at, merging policies, and, maybe looking at the time, and maybe this is something that board members, committee members could reach out to Dr. Robarczyk with questions and could discuss, and they could bring it back next month. Does that make sense?
I'm surprised this didn't go to finance. This is the kind of thing that typically goes to finance.
It eventually would. It was to be brought here as a discussion of the type of services first, and then it would go to finance in regards to the cost. That was the idea behind it. I mean, we.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think there has to be a decision on whether or not this is something we want to embark
Right.
upon, first and foremost. Is this something we're even interested in doing?
that's probably a question the finance committee would want to know, is what does the policy committee think?
Correct.
Right.
And then it goes to finance if the policy committee has and interest in these services.
True.
So if I can just take a moment just to explain the difference between these, because we did go through, as I said, we had a phone conference with PSBA. The merged employee policy service, what they're finding is a lot of districts are merging their 300s, 400s, and 500 policies together and making it one category because they are repetitive of each other, and they're just really definitive to the specific just employees overall as compared to administrative staff and contracted. The policy review service, that is the comprehensive service that would be available in regards to basically over a 3-year process of reviewing, a comprehensive review of all the policies, bringing them into compliance with state and federal laws. And that would also kind of merge into the student handbook and district website as well. The policy conversion process is basically what Patty just explained, was getting them up onto the web-based and embedding the links. Those are the legal footnotes. So when you have the number 1 next to a word, it'll automatically take you to a link to a reference. And then the administrative regulations, there's 2 offerings there. The one is the subscription to the administrative regulations updates, and then the second provides the actual administration manual. We just have to look into this a little bit further because, Patty, correct me if I'm wrong, but the administrative regulations that they're providing that service, it was their administrative regulations. It was very generic, so we really want to stick with our regulations in regards to what we've developed.
Tony, just in terms of the policy review service, the review doesn't consist just of looking over all the policies and bringing them into, seeing if they're in compliance or not. They don't bring the policies into compliance. That's the work of the policy committee. But they would look them over and see which, for the policy review service, the comprehensive service. The other thing that they do is that they take a look at your policies and see how consistent they are with your handbooks, your professional contracts, and all that stuff. So that's a much bigger piece.
They actually insert language, my understanding.
I'll just jump right in.
Go ahead.
My understanding
You need your
they
mic.
would look at their PSBA boilerplate policies. They would look at the district's policies. They would look at the district's handbooks, the district's, forget, there were 6 or
Right.
7
Yeah, there's 6 or
things,
7 different things that
and
they
come up
merge.
with what they think should be your policy.
And
They're
then,
not going to
give you the
revise
sample.
our policy.
Correct.
Right,
They're going
that's
to
what
give you a proposed policy.
so they do offer language to put into, insert into your policies. That's what I was meaning.
Yeah, school code,
This, right,
federal code, all that.
yes.
So based on time and based on the fact that we're not looking to make a decision tonight.
Yep.
Right.
I think there's time for board members, the committee members, to review this and ask questions over the next month.
Okay. And should we bring it back next month to make a recommendation, maybe to put it, to toss it over to finance if there's something there that we want to have them evaluate?
Well, again, I think the first and foremost, I think the committee needs to decide whether or not this is something we
That's what
want
I'm,
to, yeah.
but do
before
you
we-
envision that being a committee discussion, a public committee discussion, or you just, how do you see that
Yes,
happening?
yeah, I
Right.
think that this committee needs to decide, is this something the committee is interested in pursuing?
Right.
Well, I
Okay.
can say right now, yes, this is something that I'm interested in. I don't need another month to look at this and come back. I think I have enough information in front of me and enough conversations that I've had with Tony about this and how it's going to streamline some of the stuff we do and create other opportunities for other people to do other things. So I would be willing to just move it to finance. I'll be to recommend moving it to finance. And I guess the one question that I do have, when they're going to roll the policies, like it's an every 3-year thing, would they or could they do like a roll in where they do 1 year and then 2 years and then 3 years? So they're only reviewing every 3 years. They're reviewing, but only 1/3 of our policies. Is that how they?
Whatever,
It-
however we want. them to
Yeah,
do
I
it.
was going to say, we
Okay.
dictate to
If we do
them.
all- If we want them to do all the even ones and then all the odd ones, or every 3rd one, they do whatever we told them to
Oh,
do.
okay, great, thank you.
And just for clarification, the $6,700 is it's divided over 3 years.
Jeez, what a deal.
I hear what Chuck's saying. What I would personally support is going through the merged employee policy service, and let's see how that piece goes. And then because, and then see if we wanted to go with option, the policy review service, the more comprehensive or the other ones, the review service. That would be my thought, just knowing that it's something new, and if we had a good positive experience, that would be my thought on that piece.
Okay, so we want to leave this with, well, there are two options, so why don't we, in the interest of time, just quickly review those options next month? One, we have support, I think Chuck is in favor of the whole comprehensive review. Susan's in proposing that we just start with the merged and see how that goes. Maybe the question to ask, is there some sort of cost efficiency that we lose or gain with doing it in a multi-step process as opposed to everything at once? Because I know they had written in some discounts if you subscribe to a couple services as opposed to just one. So can we revisit that in December?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, super. So with that, thank you. We'll have our final public comments.
Judy Sherry. I hope in December, when you are reviewing this, that the information will be available for the public to make a comment about, since it's not tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? No? Okay, so we're adjourned. See you in December.